This evening, let's explore the surprising link between mindfulness, personal magnetism, and sensuality. I remember junior high, and when puberty came, it grabbed me by the lapels, shook me like a French au pair, and stole my lunch money. I remember searching for the magic cure to transform from the timid Walter Mitty into Bond, James Bond. Guess what? It don't exist. There are different personality types. And if you try to become someone else for the sake of attracting someone, you may work. You may attract someone, but eventually you'll be yourself again, and they won't be attracted to who you really, really are. Better to be who you really are, the best version of you. And just like ants to a picnic, the right partner will come a-calling. So that's what we're going to focus on right now. Not how to become someone we're not, now how to become the illusory alpha, which of course is based on pop psychology, because the original study was debunked, ironically, by the man who made the study. So the whole idea of you got to be an alpha, no, that's based on bad science, debunked studies. So how can we become who we really are in the most authentic, effortless, and sustainable way to draw to us the companions, platonic and otherwise, who are best suited to make us happy and whom we are best suited to make them happy? That is exactly what we're going to discuss tonight. There is a neurosis. There is neurosis. And of course, the term was coined by your favorite cocaine addict and mine, Sigmund Freud. And being a physician, he looked at neurosis as literally an irritation of the nerves. And that's not incorrect. I remember one time rescuing a puppy, and when it walked away, little teeny worms would wave to us from its rear. And its antsiness told us, or inferred to us, that it was completely uncomfortable because of the parasites in its belly. Now, will meditation deworm us literally? No, not at all. Not even a little bit. But it will do so metaphorically. It has been said that into each life some rain must fall. And ask a biologist, they'll tell you there are stressors. Some are circumstantial, some are physical, some are interpersonal, some are mental. We evolved to be able to perceive stressors as a survival mechanism. So if anybody tells you your problem is perceiving, no, it's not. Perceiving's awesome. However, perceiving triggers instinctual impulses. And those instinctual impulses are great as tools, but they are terrible as bosses. And when our life is in the shitter, when we are a nervous wreck, when we just can't stand ourselves, that is because these tools are survival mechanisms, the most basic of which being to shove at some things and reach for other things, which is entirely useful at certain times. But when it runs 100% of the time, when it controls our choices and our utterances and our deeds, we're going to be miserable. We're going to be uncomfortable in our own skin, and no one else will be comfortable around us. Now listen, we are mammals. We evolved to be social entities. As mammals, we evolved to deeply value our social group, whether we call that group a pack or a tribe or a herd. So this is not some neurosis. It's not the symptom of a weak personality. We evolved to need people. Pragmatically, let's face it, as humans go, we are not the fleetest of foot. We are not the strongest of arm. We have not the sharpest of claw. We have not the longest of fang. But we have great craniums and relatively weak bodies. But we have numbers and hopefully cleverness and cooperation. We have two, what's it called? Reward systems. We have the primary dopamine-oriented reproductive system, and it's pleasure-driven, and it's to make sure we do the things we need to survive. That we drink water, we eat food, we seek shelter, we seek reproduction, we seek safety. This is hardwired into us to be pleasurable, but not fulfilling. Fulfillment comes from our second, what's it called? Our second reward system, that's oxytocin oriented, and instead of giving us pleasure, it gives us a sense of fulfillment. It rewards relationships, both intimate and platonic, professional and personal. So we are wired for companionship. The key is, how do we set ourselves up for success in that arena? If the first noble truth is there are stressors, and the second noble truth is there are mechanisms that when abused make us nutty, the third noble truth is there is a way of living so that we are free not from the presence of our survival impulses, but from their tyranny, so that although they are present, they no longer control all our thoughts or all our utterances or all our deeds. And that's a good thing. So the question is, how do we receive that liberation? And the answer is the fourth noble truth, by practicing the Eightfold Path. In self-help circles, there are some very sincere practitioners, but there are a lot of hucksters. There are a lot of people prancing about like wolves in sheep's clothing who promise to liberate you from your lack and sorrows and inadequacies, but all they're going to really liberate you from is your money. And I can think of no finer example of this than the authenticity movement that's been very popular for the last 20 or so years. I remember one time attending an event, and some guy comes up to me out of the blue, and he says, "I don't think you're being authentic." And that's how they get you. And you start second-guessing yourself, and often they work in teams of male and female, and they'll hook very insecure, involuntary male celibates by saying, by having the female partner and the two partner teams talk openly about attraction and meaningless sex and how sometimes that's what they want. And there's these really, really insidious non-sexual seduction mechanisms, manipulative sales techniques they use to hoodwink you, once again, out of your time, energy, and money for the goal of authenticity. But here's the greatest joke of all, or here's the punchline. Practice the Buddha's meditation method, and you'll be truly authentic. You can't contrive authenticity. You can't neurotically second-guess yourself into a state of authenticity any more than you can make love in the name of virginity. I mean, you can make love and say you're doing it in the name of virginity, but it's not going to get you closer to virginity. It's not going to protect your virginity. It's pretty much the antidote to virginity. Likewise, neurotically pursuing authenticity prevents authenticity. But practice the Buddha's method of mindfulness meditation and contemplation once every 12 hours. And you will be practicing, you'll find yourself practicing authenticity spontaneously and habitually and easily and effectively. Practice the Buddha's 12 meditations and 4 contemplations, and you will know yourself. Far too often, all of us, to one degree or another, have been guilty in romantic and platonic relationships of being who the other person wants us to be or needs us to be. And this is not always done maliciously. This is not always done deliberately, but it does happen. In intimate relationships, we're often so busy trying to win someone's heart that we're not giving them the chance to beneficially reject who we really are and us reject who they really are. That doesn't mean just because our kinks don't align that we can't be friends or at least acquaintances with people who enter our sphere. But if we're going to be happy, if we're going to be fulfilled, we have to be honest with each other about what we need and what we want. And we cannot do that if first we're not vulnerable with ourselves. We have been raised, each of us, to second guess ourselves, to chastise our desires and our preferences, telling ourselves that we must be all things to all beings everywhere. I remember that was my philosophy when I was in junior high. I'd like to think I've evolved since then. I sure hope I have. So remember that wonderful scene in the first Matrix movie when the Oracle points out that sign to Neo that was the Greek version of the phrase, know thyself. Or perhaps it was Latin. And so we know ourselves not through doing, answering questionnaires, not through journaling. We know ourselves by practicing the Buddha's 12 meditations and 4 contemplations, and who we are just bubbles up like a ripe whitehead on the face of an adolescent. In preparation for tonight's meditation and contemplation, I'd like to chat with you. But first, let's pause for a bit of the old housekeeping. Oops. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible by the generosity of viewers just like you through the apparatus of Patreon. If you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate as profoundly as Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo, who interrupted a duel for a bit of the old meditation, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Before we chant, I want to share with you some good news. If at any point during this evening's live stream you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them to your life, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. Tonight's practice text is titled Secular Mindfulness Meditation and Contemplation, and it is my adaptation of the ancient meditation manual, the Anapanasati Sutta. Just as every sprint ends with someone throwing themselves through the finish line and begins with a starter's pistol, I found it useful to end every meditation by chanting the 4 measurables, and begin every meditation by chanting a recitation of bodhicitta and refuge, which simply helps to exercise the neural pathways responsible for empathy and enthusiasm. Together, let's chant. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. So I want to take a moment to revisit some ideas from the opening lesson. I don't know if you're as geeky as me, but when I was in junior high, I stumbled upon The Life of Brian. And at one point, Brian's mom says, "Sex, sex, sex, that's all you think about." "No, mother, I don't think about sex. Will the girls love this? Will the girls love that?" And every boy in junior high, that's their mantra. "Will the girls like this, Mom? Will the girls like that? If I do that, will the girls like that? If I do this, will the girls like that?" Better to be oneself, but be one's best self. And what does that mean? To be oneself non-neurotically. We're not always going to get what we want when we want it for as long as we want it. Sometimes we're going to get the opposite of what we want. We have to be honest with what's going on. We have to be honest with what we feel about it. And we have to make peace with what's going on and what we feel about it. The more we make peace with our circumstances and our reaction to our circumstances, the less neurotic we'll be. And that's exactly what we're going to play with these 12 meditations and 4 contemplations. There's nothing secret here. These are public knowledge. They've been public knowledge for a long time, especially now. We're living in a literate society here in the West with the internet. So the insights I'm sharing with you are just the insights that have come from wrestling with these teachings for multiple decades. The teachings themselves are out there for everyone. So, as I mentioned, we're going to play with 12 meditations and 4 contemplations. That's a total of 16, which divides evenly by 4. We start now with our first set of 4. We begin with Kaya Sati's only set of 4 preliminary meditations to center our bodies. Now, Anapanasati, contrary to popular belief, does not mean mindfulness of breath. It means mindfulness with breathing. So in other words, breathing becomes the carrier wave upon which our mindfulness surfs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to play with a rhetorical question. As we breathe in, we're going to silently and mentally ask how. As we exhale, we're going to silently and mentally ask long. Now, I've mentioned this is a rhetorical question. Our job is not to answer the question, how long is our breath? Our job is simply to silently and mentally recite these words in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation and our relaxation. And just to sort of passively observe the effect this exercise might have upon our mind and upon our body. Let's play with this now for approximately 2 sets of 16 rounds. Our job is not to force our breath to be longer. Our job is simple, to silently and mentally recite these words in harmony with our naturally occurring inhalation, exhalation, and relaxation. Our job is not to concentrate. Our job is not to maintain a state of thoughtlessness. We let our central nervous system do what it has evolved to do. Our central nervous system has evolved to perceive the five senses of sight, sound, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, and also to perceive mind and its emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We are not to chase some perceptions and run from others. We are to be vulnerable. We instead of practicing active concentration, we're to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness was just perception, practiced vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. We're going to continue practice mindfulness of our breathing from the opposite perspective. How short? Now, just like before, we're not trying to control the length or brevity of our breathing. We're just playing with words in harmony with our inhalation, exhalation, and relaxation in an effort to harmonize with our mindfulness. Every time we breathe in, we access our sympathetic nervous system, which is already wired for mindfulness, vulnerable, passive, visceral, and random. Every time we exhale, we involuntarily access our parasympathetic nervous system, which is already wired for mental release and physical relaxation. These mechanisms are hardwired into most vertebrate species on this planet. If mindfulness is a birthright, why are we meditating? Well, humans have a 3-pound squishy supercomputer between our ears. Meditating allows us to harmonize our intention with our most fundamental neurological wiring. It's perfectly okay for different things to pop up in our mind while we're practicing. For emotions or intentions or thoughts or memories or imaginings, that's just fine. Let it happen. It's going to happen anyway, whether we let it or not. Sometimes these words will be in the foreground. Sometimes these words will be in the background. That's fine. Don't fight your mind. Dance with your mind. Every memory, no matter how glorious or how grotesque, that we endure as we breathe in is healed, at least a little bit, as we relax in each exhalation. We allow our sphere of mindfulness now to expand beyond the boundaries of our respiratory system. As now we turn our attention to our bodies with the phrase, during each inhalation we silently and mentally recite the verb feel, and during each exhalation we silently and mentally recite the noun form, which functions as a simile, no, as a synonym, there you go, for body. Those of us who have endured and survived abusive childhoods often survived such tsuris by learning how to fawn and learning how to watch our oppressors very carefully, how to anticipate their moods, and then to adapt our utterances and our behaviors and our even belief systems to accommodate the whims of our oppressors. A consequence of this survival strategies is a loss of authenticity and a tendency to be frightened, to be spontaneous in choice and word and deed, and to value safety or the hope of safety over the danger of centered spontaneity and its possible consequences. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the noun form. As we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb calm. Now, this is not an adjective. We're not lying to ourselves about how calm our bodies are. Rather, we are instructing our intention. We are guiding our intention with words. We can't guide our intention with lies, by lying to ourselves about how peaceful we are. But we can guide our intention through the cunning use of words and respiration. Because, as I mentioned previously, every time we exhale, we are wired to physically relax and mentally release. So by using a word to reflect this physical relaxation and release, and reciting it in harmony with our exhalation, is to stack the deck in our favor. We continue with Vedana Sati's set of 4 jhana meditations centering our feelings. By the way, welcome to this evening's live stream. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them to your life, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window on the right-hand side of the page. Jhana can mean level. We begin with our first of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the first jhana's blissful joy that flows from gently grinning with the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes, grinning towards our bodies of flesh, blood, and bone. People who are controlled by fear tend to be rigid and elitist. People who are controlled by love tend to be flexible and egalitarian. The rigid and elitist would tell you that jhanas are for the chosen few special people. But the Buddha seemed to think differently. He taught that mastery of the path could be attained in as little as 7 months, or 7 quarters, or 7 years, 7 quarters, 7 months, 7 fortnights, 7 weeks, or even 7 days. It's simple. As we silently and as we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin. As we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the noun form, which is a synonym for body. We don't have to force ourselves to smile. If all we do is silently and mentally recite these words in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation and our relaxation, our subconscious, like an autopilot, will do all the heavy lifting for us. One of my late teachers, bless his heart, was very much into contrivance as opposed to spontaneity. And he instructed all his nuns and monks to keep little compact mirrors on their bodies, on their persons, so they could whip them out and make sure they were smiling. Science has shown us that to force a smile is to actually create or exacerbate the causes of depression. But there's nothing wrong with silently and mentally reciting that word grin as you breathe in. Let your body do the rest. We come to the second of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the second jhana's peaceful joy that flows from, once again, gently grinning with the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes. This time towards thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. And so you could probably tell that we're using thought as an umbrella term. Similar to the last exercise, as we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin. And this time as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the umbrella term thoughts. Remember, every time we breathe in, we are wired to notice all manner of things spontaneously. Whether we could notice the external, the internal, the physical, the mental, the pleasurable, the painful, the interesting, the boring, the glorious, and the grotesque. We don't get to choose what we notice. Once we choose, it's no longer mindfulness, it's concentration. It's no longer passive, it's active. It's no longer flexible, it's rigid. So we choose to be flexible and vulnerable and go where our bodies take us, go where our minds take us. It takes a lot of courage to practice this stuff. This is October, all kinds of haunted houses pop up around the county, but none are as horrific as the one between our ears. Eh? Now we come to the third of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices where we savor the third jhana's contentment. By mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. How do we do that? Simple. In a manner not dissimilar from a previous exercise we've done tonight. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the sensory verb feel. And as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the noun, which is functioning as an umbrella term. Feel as we breathe in, thoughts as we breathe out. Sometimes our thoughts are pleasurable, sometimes they're painful, sometimes they're subtle, sometimes they're coarse, sometimes they're interesting, sometimes they're boring, sometimes they're glorious, others grotesque. we come to the fourth of four feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the fourth jhana's neutrality by allowing our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining to tranquilly relax. As we breathe in, we recite the umbrella term thoughts. As we breathe out, we recite the word calm. Now, we do not use the word calm as an adjective. We are not telling ourselves a lie and calling it an affirmation. We are treating the word calm like a verb, like it is an instruction that we are feeding the supercomputer that is our intentional mind. Or to put it perhaps differently, we are feeding our supercomputer of our mind the command to calm through the port of intention. That's right, the Let's continue with Chitta Sati's second set of 4 jhana meditations centering our mind. We begin with the first of 4 mind-oriented centering practices where we savor the 5th jhana's sphere of infinite spaciousness by mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our mind's ability to see, hear, feel, taste, smell, and the like. Clearly, we're using the word mind as an umbrella term to encapsulate the 3 outer forms of perception. As we breathe in, we could silently and mentally recite the sensory verb feel. And as we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite the noun, which functions as an umbrella term, mind. We come to the second of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 6th jhana's sphere of infinite awareness, which we generate by allowing our mind to gladden, as towards it we gently smile. From the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes. Or perhaps I should say, from the crow's feet of our eyes, the apples of our cheeks, and the corners of our mouth. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin. As we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the noun mind, which functions as an umbrella term for our capacities to perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. Let's seal this evening's meditation by chanting the 4 immeasurables. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could type something in the chat window. You could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could share it with a friend. You could even help support this channel on Patreon, either by capturing the QR code on the screen with your smartphone camera, or by merely clicking the Patreon link in the description area below the video. In approximately 10 2/3 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's early morning lesson and meditation. Until then, this is the way.